Street this morning. They're digesting this news, considering their next steps. Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, was asked about that and didn't have an entirely clear answer. But what was clear, and the message was consistent with what we've been hearing this week, they do want to see a de-escalation. They do want to see negotiation. What's not clear, and what he wasn't able to answer, is what that would look like in practice in the coming hours and days. I'm sure the Prime Minister, if we hear from him today, the Foreign Secretary too, will be asked exactly that question. OK, Tony Bonsignori there, our political correspondent. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date with that. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke after the strikes as well, praising the US President Donald Trump for the decision to do those strikes and for the general US support for Israel.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Well, Iran has also been responding to those US strikes. The Iranian Foreign Minister Saeed Abbas Araghchi condemned the US strikes and said Iran was reserving all options to defend its sovereignty. In a post on X, Araghchi added, "The events this morning are outrageous and will have everlasting consequences. Each and every member of the UN must be alarmed over this extremely dangerous, lawless and criminal behaviour," he said. Well, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Rafael Grossi, has also responded to the strikes, posting, "In light of the urgent situation in Iran, I am convening an emergency meeting of the IAEA Board of Governors for tomorrow." The United Nations General Secretary Antonio Guterres has also issued a statement about the strikes. He said, "I am gravely alarmed by the use of force by the United States against Iran today. This is a dangerous escalation in a region already on the edge and a direct threat to international peace and security." He continued, "There is a growing risk that this conflict could rapidly get out of control with catastrophic consequences for civilians, the region and the world." Well, here is an Israeli official speaking about one of the Iranian retaliation attacks in Haifa.
What we have over here is a rocket attack on Haifa city. Our ambulances and intensive care unit rushed to the scene. We discovered over here 4 minor wounded and 2 people with anxiety reaction. That's it. Our EMTs and paramedics rushed them to the hospital within 10 minutes. And thank God, that's everything for now. One of my volunteers lives over here in the building behind us. He was minor wounded. He left everything, gave first aid, and only after the event, he went to the hospital to check himself. Other than that, everything is okay.
Now, we are expecting further response from Iran. I can show you the live pictures here of the location there where we are expecting to have that press conference from the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. We will bring that to you live as soon as it gets started. Interested to hear the Iranian response to those US strikes on 3 sites overnight. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll come back to it as soon as it starts. But for the moment, let's go live to Jerusalem, to our correspondent there, Dan Johnson. Dan, we were just hearing from an Israeli spokesperson there about the situation in Haifa. What can you tell us about what's going on in the rest of the country right now?
Yeah, there are emergency teams responding to missile strikes right across Israel. About 30 ballistic missiles that were launched by Iran early this morning, presumably in response to what the US and Israelis did overnight. So just as Israeli citizens were waking up this morning and absorbing that news that the US had conducted those strikes, the alerts came through mobile phones, the air raid sirens sounded, and people were told to go to shelters for safety. And then we heard the interceptions of Israeli air defense intercepting the Iranian missiles over Jerusalem and over many other cities. But some of those missiles have got through. They've caused significant damage to some buildings that we've seen pictures of. We've got colleagues who are going to some of those sites to check out the situation on the ground now. We know that perhaps 80 or 90 people have been injured in those attacks, and emergency teams are still going through some of the wreckage, the debris, the damaged buildings at those sites to check whether anybody else has been hurt or whether indeed anybody's been killed. So I think the awareness was there that this escalation overnight was going to mean a greater threat to this country in the short term, and that seems to have played out already on the ground. What happens next is the key question that Israelis are considering in terms of further Iranian response, and will that just mean Israel coming under further attack, or will that be something wider that affects more countries?
And the airspace had been closed down, but we're hearing that that's to reopen to allow for some repatriation flights of those who want to leave Israel at this time.
Yeah, Israel's airspace and its airport have been closed since the start of this conflict 10 days ago now. They don't officially reopen the airspace, but do allow limited repatriation flights to come in to evacuate either Israelis who want to leave or foreign citizens who may be working here and have been advised to leave by their home states. So we are expecting further evacuation flights when that is safe and possible, including flights that the British government is chartering to get British citizens out of here. But exactly when that will be possible is a big question, because we know Ben Gurion Airport came under attack by Iranian missiles this morning, and there's other options for getting people out. They can use the land border crossings, but it's difficult for people to know exactly when the next attack is going to come, how extensive it may be, and what the damage and impact may be. Although the immediate threat passed this morning, there are still restrictions in place on people's movement, and gatherings are banned. People have been told not to go to school, not to go to work. They're not allowed to gather in public spaces to try to keep them safe. So some level of restriction still in place, and an awareness that further air strikes could be possible. They're expecting the sirens potentially at any time. But that is the big question of what Iran now is capable of doing in response, and where it chooses to target that response.
Given how things have escalated in the last 9 or 10 days, Dan, what is the level of support like amongst the Israeli public for what's happening?
It is pretty strong amongst Israelis. They're very supportive of their military and the airstrikes that have been launched against Iran. I think there was also a large amount of public opinion in support of the US getting involved. I was speaking to some people who had their homes destroyed by an Iranian missile just the other day. I said, what do you think should happen next? And they said the Israeli military should continue and the US should get involved to make sure that the threat they perceive from Iran developing a nuclear program could be eradicated. Now, Donald Trump is saying that the strikes overnight have achieved that. The Iranians, in response, initially have played that down, saying that actually the damage from these strikes has been limited, that the nuclear sites had been evacuated, and that material had already been moved somewhere else to a safe location. So they've downplayed the impact of this on the ground, but at the same time they've responded in strong terms politically, saying that this is an outrageous act, an escalation, a breach of international law and UN charters, and they've promised retribution. It's now just a question of exactly what form that will take, what they have left in terms of missile stocks, what they're able to launch, because the Israelis have been very successful over the last 10 days in eradicating missile launch sites. About 2/3 of those have been put out of action by the Israeli Air Force. So Iran's capabilities are depleted, but it still has missiles, it's still capable of launching them, and it showed this morning that they can still get through Israeli air defences and cause damage and injury on the ground in this country. Will Iran carry out more of those attacks, and will it target those attacks on US potential targets around this region, either US military bases where troops are stationed, or the sort of diplomatic sites, different consulates, embassies, American companies that are based in the Middle East, American shipping in the seas. Those are the sorts of sites that could now be vulnerable if Iran chooses to do that. But the big question is, what is Iran capable of? What does it calculate in terms of the appropriate response to this? Are we going to see further escalation? Certainly, everyone in this country and across this region is braced, holding their breath to see what comes next.
Okay, Dan Johnson there in Jerusalem. Thank you for that. Just going to dip into the scene in Istanbul here. This is where the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi will soon be holding a press conference to talk about just what Dan's been describing there, how Iran is going to respond to this. We're expecting to get a bit of an update as to what damage the US strikes have actually wreaked on those 3 sites. We heard President Trump use the word obliterated. We can't obviously independently verify that, but we'll keep an eye on that press conference scene there. You can just see everybody getting organised there and awaiting the arrival of the Iranian foreign minister, which, judging by the level of activity there, might be quite imminent. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. In the meantime, let's go live to Washington, D.C. and speak to our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue. Gary, the last time we heard from President Trump on this was he was going to make a decision within 2 weeks. He was going to give a chance to negotiations to take place. What happened between Thursday and last night where he greenlit the strikes on these 3 sites in Iran?
Well, it's a good question, and it's something we don't know the specific answer to. There are only really 2 possibilities. One is that this was something of a feint, of a ruse, a red herring, this 2-week deadline, although it's something that the president does like, these deadlines. They do sometimes come and go without much happening, and certainly something happened this time around. The other option is perhaps the more obvious one, which is that once this has been set, then the foreign minister of Iran met the Europeans in Geneva and came out and said, look, we're not going to talk until you stop bombing us. And there was that was repeated yesterday, and obviously there are back channels going on as well. So, it's perfectly possible that the president took the view that, look, this is not changing in any way, despite my ultimatum. So why wait? He will be asked this, and I'm pretty sure he'll answer it actually when he is asked it, and we'll see what the workings were. But it did come as something of a surprise, if not a shock. I think that would be the way I'd put it.
I suppose he did say within 2 weeks, so technically any time from an hour after that was within that deadline that he had set. But it was quite interesting to watch, Gary, wasn't it, when the president came out to speak and make that announcement that he had the vice president with him, Secretary of State and acting National Security Advisor with him, and the Defence Secretary, very much putting forward a united front, which is not what we had seen from the Republican Party on this issue in the past few days.
No, and I think that is significant. I mean, Donald Trump is not someone who naturally wishes to share the limelight. And while they, had non-speaking parts, they were there. And I think that was some sort of message that this is a unified position, because we know that, among those 3, there isn't necessarily always.
Gary, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there. We'll get back to you a little bit later, but that press conference of the Iranian foreign minister in Istanbul, Abbas Araghchi, is just starting to speak on the stage. So let's have a listen to what he's saying.
Very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks.
I'm so glad to be with you this morning. Actually, we invited you yesterday for a briefing on the latest developments on the ground, and of course on diplomatic process. Because I came here from Geneva, where we had our first ministerial meeting of Iran E3, and then I had here yesterday lots of useful, important meetings with the foreign ministers of our region, and we discussed about different initiatives and ideas existed for a peaceful settlement of this question. But as all of you know, we suddenly faced with the aggression by American forces to our nuclear facilities. The Islamic Republic of Iran condemns in the strongest terms the United States' brutal military aggression against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The warmongering and lawless administration in Washington is solely and fully responsible for the dangerous consequences and far-reaching implications of its act of aggression. The US military attack on the territorial integrity and national sovereignty of a UN member state carried out with genocidal Israeli regime, carried out in collusion with the genocidal Israeli regime, has once again revealed the extent of the United States' hostility towards the peace-seeking people of Iran, who will never compromise over their independence and sovereignty. The Islamic Republic of Iran continues to defend Iran's territory, sovereignty, security, and people by all means necessary against not just US military aggression, but also the reckless and unlawful actions of the Israeli regime. While President Trump was elected on a platform of putting an end to America's costly involvement of forever wars in our part of the world, he has betrayed not only Iran by abusing our commitment to diplomacy, but also deceived his own voters by submitting to the wishes of a wanted war criminal who has grown accustomed to exploiting the lives and wealth of American citizens to further the Israeli regime's objectives. The US act of aggression against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities constitutes not only a flagrant breach of the UN Charter, especially the prohibition of the use of force under Article 2, Paragraph 4, and the obligation to respect the state's territorial integrity and sovereignty, but also a violation of UN Security Council Resolution 2231. It cannot be emphasized enough how much of a devastating blow that the US, a permanent member of the Security Council, has dealt to the global non-proliferation regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran reminds the United Nations, the Security Council, the UN Secretary General, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and other relevant international bodies of their duty and responsibility to take urgent and decisive action in response to this breach of international law. Silence in the face of such blatant aggression will plunge the world into an unprecedented level of danger and chaos. Humanity has come too far as a species to allow a lawless bully to take us back to the law of the jungle. The Islamic Republic of Iran calls on the Security Council to convene an emergency session to unequivocally condemn the criminal act of aggression by the United States against Iran and to hold the administration in Washington accountable for its violations of fundamental principles of United Nations Charter and of norms of international law. The responsibility of the IAEA and its Director General, who through evident bias in favor of warmongering parties paved the way for the current violence and bloodshed, is now clearer than ever. We call on the IAEA Board of Governors to immediately convene and carry out its legal responsibility in response to the dangerous US attack on Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities, all of which have been under the agency's full safeguards and monitoring. The world must not forget that it was the United States which, in the midst of a process to forge a diplomatic outcome, betrayed diplomacy by supporting the genocidal Israeli regime's launch of an illegal war of aggression on the Iranian nation. Not content with such malign actions, the United States itself has now also opted for a dangerous military operation and aggression against the people of Iran. In doing so, the US administration holds sole and full responsibility for the consequences of its actions, including the Islamic Republic of Iran's right to self-defense under the principles of the United Charter. In accordance with the UN Charter and its provisions allowing a legitimate response in self-defense, Iran reserves all options to defend its security, interests, and people. Thank you very much.
We will now be taking questions. We'd like to start with the Associated Press.
Whoever can.
Sayın Bakan, müzakere kapıları hala açık mı görüyorsunuz?
Doors for negotiation are still open.
Şimdi ses geliyor mu?
Can you hear me now?
Sayın Bakan,
Distinguished Minister, the question is as follows. Is the door for negotiations still open?
hadi değil mi?
No translation. Interpreter, please speak.
Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir? In the English channel, can you hear me?
We're just watching here a press conference in Istanbul with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. He has made a statement there, very strongly worded, describing the US attacks on the 3 sites in Iran as outrageous, grave and unprecedented. He said this act of aggression will have far-reaching implications. He accused the US of betraying diplomacy, of breaching international law, and said the US holds full and sole responsibility for the consequences. He's taking questions now. Let's listen in.
Intermediary country like Turkey, like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, are you continuing your such activities of mediation? How do you see the process? Thank you.
Well, I have been in touch with Tehran, of course. I still do not have exact information about the level of damages, but I don't think it matters how much damages have been made. Attacking a nuclear facility by itself is an unforgivable violation of international law and should be condemned. Yesterday, as I said, I had discussion and talks with a number of foreign ministers of the region. Almost all of them are very much concerned and interested to play a role to end this aggression by Israel, of course. They were worried about a possible attack by the United States, but yesterday we were all talking about how to stop the Israeli aggression. Well, Of course, the door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now. My country has been under attack, under aggression, and we have to respond based on our legitimate right of self-defense. And we will do that as long as needed and necessary.
We'd now like to take a question from Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much, Minister. So you say that you need to respond right now, but we know that Iranians are known for their talents in negotiations in diplomacy and trade. What would be the conditions after responding for Iran to come back to a negotiation table, maybe with the US as well? And Turkey has been offering that Ankara can mediate for a trilateral between Turkey, US, and Iran. What would be your response to that? Because right now the US is technically involved in this conflict. Thank you.
Well, I think it is irrelevant to ask Iran to return to diplomacy, because we were in the middle of diplomacy. We were in the middle of talks with the United States when Israelis blew it up. And again, we were in the middle of talks and negotiation with Europeans, happened only 2 days ago in Geneva, when this time Americans decided to blow it up. So we were in diplomacy, but we were attacked militarily. So it was not Iran, but the US who betrayed diplomacy. They betrayed negotiations. When at the middle of negotiations with us, they gave green light to Israelis, if not instructed them to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. I think they have proved that they are not men of diplomacy, and they only understand the language of threat and force. And this is very unfortunate. The United States showed that they have no respect to United Nations Charter. They have no respect to international law. They have no respect to any international law regarding, managing the world and facing challenges of the world. There is no red line that they have not crossed. And the last one, and the most dangerous one, happened only last night, when they crossed a very big red line by attacking nuclear facilities. I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy. We are now calculating the damages. And as I said, the damages are not only for our nuclear facilities, the damages are for the United Nations Charter. It was not only Iran's facilities which was bombed, it was also the United Nations Charter. It was also Non-Proliferation Regime and NPT, which was bombed last night by Americans. And it was the rule of law and international law which was bombed. So now we have to see how much room is left for diplomacy, and we will decide.
I'd like to hand over to TRT World.
Mr. Minister, the US President Donald Trump warned that Iran must now make peace, otherwise the future attacks, he says, would be far greater and much easier. So how is Tehran responding to that threats from Washington? Thank you.
I think it's not up to Iran to respond to that. The whole international community should respond of such a clear threat against the United Nations Charter. Iran has done nothing wrong. We do not understand why Iran should be attacked for a false accusation that Iran is seeking nuclear weapons. It's now more than 20 years that we are trying to prove that our peaceful nuclear program is in fact peaceful and would remain peaceful. We negotiated for a long time with the so-called P5+1, and we came to a deal which the whole world celebrated as an achievement of diplomacy. And then it was the US who withdrew from that deal and reimposed their sanctions and restarted their threats. Again, we were negotiating with the same administration. Then all of a sudden they decided to attack us, first by Israelis, then by themselves. And now they are threatening us for more attacks. So it's not up to Iran, but it's up to international community to condemn this, to prevent this. Otherwise, there would be nothing left for the international law, for the security at the world level. The Security Council should play its role, should play its responsibility to condemn and prevent these kind of threats. We will certainly defend our interests. We will certainly defend our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and our people. And I'm so glad that our people are now fully understand what injustice they are doing against the Iranian people. They are united and in solidarity with the government, and we stand firm against any aggression.
Next, CNN Türk.
Mr. Minister, how do you assess the West's stance on Israel massacres? No one seems to mention Israel's allegedly illegal nuclear weapons. The German Chancellor even said Israel is doing the dirty work for us. So what is your response? Thank you.
Well, what should I say? You said everything. That Iran is under attack by a nuclear-armed superpower and a nuclear-armed regime. And Iran, as you know, is a non-nuclear-armed country. That should be certainly condemned. If not, the whole non-proliferation regime would be undermined and would be defeated. Iran is a committed member of NPT. But NPT is not able to protect us. So why a country like Iran or other countries who are interested to have a peaceful nuclear energy should rely on NPT for their peaceful activities? It is very unfortunate that Israel is doing, as the German Chancellor called, a dirty job. And by the way, they supported that dirty job. It's a shame. They know that Israel is doing a dirty job and they support it, and they give it every right to do it, and they call it defending itself. It's really a shame. Pardon? Well, I think I'm not in a position to reveal what we are going to do in response to what Americans did last night. I just talked about the fact that NPT failed to protect Iran from and its peaceful nuclear program, and this is a serious challenge.
Next, we'd like to take a question from IRIB. IRIB, if I can get a question from IRIB.
Yılmaz Parlar, Türker Gazete, Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'nde çıkan gazete.
I'm from a Turkic newspaper and also representing Net News Agency.
İran'a destek verdiği söyleniyor.
It is indicated that China is supporting Iran.
Tarafından caydırıcı olmasını nasıl
How do you evaluate its deterrence power vis-a-vis USA and Israel? And can we learn your expectations about your relations with the Russian Federation?
Well, there was a problem with the translation, or I think with the device, it doesn't work properly. I understood the last part of your question. Well, I'm going to Moscow this afternoon, and I have a meeting with President Putin tomorrow morning. Russia is a friend of Iran, and we enjoy a strategic partnership, and we always consult with each other and coordinate our positions. Russia has been a part and the participants of JCPOA, so they have been always a party to nuclear negotiations. And even in the past 2-3 months that we were negotiating with the United States, we always briefed our Russian friends about the latest about any progress or lack of progress in our talks. Well, I will have serious consultations with the Russian president tomorrow, and we continue to work with each other. Russia is also a permanent member of the Security Council, and we know that they were trying, together with China, to introduce a resolution to the Security Council for the cessation of hostilities. Obviously, now the situation has been changed, and I will have discussion with them that how it should be proceed.
The final question from IRIB, if we can hand over the microphone to the gentleman right there. Thank you.
خسته نباشید آقای عراقچی. عرض به خدمتتون که دیروز آقای اردوغان صحبت‌هایی داشتن در مورد میانجیگری. فکر می‌کنید نقش ترکیه در این رابطه به چه ترتیب خواهد بود؟ میتونه ترکیه
Thank you. Yesterday, President Erdogan mentioned a mediation instrument. Can Turkey handle such a
من دیروز ملاقات
diplomacy
بسیار
or
خوبی رو با
mediation
جناب
activity?
آقای اردوغان رئیس جمهور محترم ترکیه داشتم. هم ترکیه
I had very productive meetings with the President of the Republic of Turkey yesterday, and I also had contacts with some of the countries of the region. Some of the countries of the region, such as Turkey, are indicating that they could be mediating so that the attacks from Israel could stop. I do believe that I'm going to start some actions and discussions about this to prevent this American aggression. Turkey very definitely has condemned the Israeli attacks, and also the countries of the region have also condemned these attacks. Now all the countries of this region and the Islamic countries are condemning the massacres and the killing of Israel. We, as members of the OIC and the foreign ministers, we had a special meeting on the situation in Iran. Turkey was the chair of this session, and in relation to condemning Israeli attacks, a statement was shared to end this attack, and they indicated that they were on our side. The attack last night was a big murder. It was not just an attack against the Iranian people, but also the laws and the provisions of the United Nations were also violated. And the NPT was also damaged. Thus, this was a big blow to international security and to peace by America. We believe that the United Nations should see this as a threat. The behavior of America is threatening the world peace, and it is also a serious bottleneck for the international system. And we have important problems and pain in our region because of this, creating an important damage. The attack last night showed once again that the Zionist regime of Israel has not actually reached its targets and aims in Iran, and they have been harmed, and they have actually been in a crisis because of the heroic defense of Iran. And vis-a-vis this defense, they have received support from America. And this direct intervention of America is actually to save the Zionist regime, and maybe to save the prime minister specifically of the Zionist regime. This was the reason why America acted this way, and this shows that the White House is under the influence of this individual called Netanyahu, and this is a shame for the all American citizens. We continue to defend our country in a heroic manner. Our armed forces are ready. Our people with high level of self-confidence and with high level of motivation is ready to defend itself. The Iranian people's national honor has been damaged, and to win this back, they will defend themselves. We will never take a step back from our own law, from our honor, from our territory, and from our people.
To Bloomberg Habertürk.
Mr. Minister, thank you very much for doing this. And I'll come from Habertürk and Bloomberg HD. You said attacks at nuclear facilities are red line, and you are calculating your response. So here is the question. What are the options? Are you going to retaliate at U.S. bases in the region, or are you going to considering to close the Strait of Hormuz? And one more question as well. 2 times while you are at the table of negotiation, Israel and U.S. attacked your soil. So do you still have the same level of trust to Western diplomacy? Thank you.
There are a variety of options available to us, and that's it. We never trusted Western countries when we negotiated them, and there are now even more reasons why we shouldn't trust them at all. Of course, the way for diplomacy should be always remain open, but as I said, we are not in the situation right now to decide how to engage in diplomacy once again and with whom. So let's wait for our response first. And when the aggression is ended, we decide how to engage in diplomacy once again.
Next, over to NTV.
Mr. Minister, thank you. I would like to ask a quick question. You had many dialogues with Mr. Steve Witkoff, the U.S. representative, during the negotiations. Did he call you after the attack? Who you talked with? Did you ever talk with any Western countries or United States? Did they call you? Thank you.
Well, my talks with Mr. Witkoff was indirect through the Omani foreign minister as intermediator, to whom I'm very grateful. And when the talks were stopped because of the US aggression, we are still receiving messages from Americans through different channels, Oman in particular, and there are also others who are passing the messages of the United States to us. And if needed, we respond to those messages through intermediators. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think we are done.
Yes, we've come to the end of that press briefing. We'd like to thank the Foreign Minister for holding that briefing after the latest developments in his country, Iran, and in the wider Middle East region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you indeed.
So we've just been watching there the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi talking about Iran's response following those strikes from the US on nuclear sites in Iran overnight, which he described as outrageous, grave and unprecedented. He said the US holds full and sole responsibility for the consequences. Iran has the right to self-defense. It's reserving all options in response. He also said that the US had crossed what he called a very big red line in bombing those nuclear sites. He said, "I don't know how much room is left for diplomacy now." And he said, "Let's wait for Iran's response, and when the aggression is ended, then we'll decide how diplomacy proceeds." Joined in studio here by our Chief International Correspondent, Lise Doucette. Lise, we've been listening there to the Foreign Minister for the last 20 minutes or so. What stood out for you from what he said?
Their position has not changed. The Foreign Minister was in Geneva. We were there as well, where the European diplomats were saying to him, "You've got to talk to the United States." He said, "Not while there are Israeli attacks on the country." Now they've been attacked by the United States, and his position is exactly the same. We will not negotiate under fire. It's clear that messages are going back and forth, and no doubt there'll be a lot more messages today. This is not just an attack on Iran. This is something which is having already repercussions across the region. There's been condemnation from states in the region, including Saudi Arabia. They will want to prevent a further escalation. But he was also, Katrina, very adamant that Iran will respond. He wouldn't go into, not surprisingly, because there was an observation that even though President Trump said that Iran's nuclear facilities were completely obliterated, as the foreign minister said, they don't know yet how much damage was done, and if there's not that much damage, they could find an off-ramp. But the message from him was it doesn't really matter how much damage was done. Symbolically, they have, as you've just mentioned, crossed a very red line. This is a very, very delicate balancing act for Iran. If it doesn't do anything, it loses face. If it does too much, it loses everything. Because if they provoke President Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States and Israel, they could come back with all of the weight of the American military might.
He also mentioned he was going to Moscow today to meet President Putin.
President Putin has been trying to intervene in this crisis. Of course, he will have many motivations for doing so. He's long wanted to be seen as a peacemaker in the Middle East. He had a statement earlier this week saying that he did not believe there was intelligence saying that Iran was developing a bomb. So he will try to maximize this opportunity. Iran is very much like other states in the region. They look east and they look west, trying to maximize their position. You also heard him saying he's obviously had talks in Turkey with the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he's a member of NATO. He has very strong alliances. He wants to be seen to be mediating. Many will want to be seen to mediate. But right now, it all rests on what Iran does next.
And the foreign minister as well, very keen to say that this was an attack on international order, on international law, not just on Iran. It's very keen to widen out the viewpoint.
Well, factually, he's correct. There was diplomacy going on when Israel unleashed its strikes that Friday morning. There was meant to be a sixth round of talks with Steve Witkoff and the Iranians in Muscat. It's a violation of the UN Charter to attack another state. Israel described it as a preemptive strike for self-defense. Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IAEA, has said repeatedly that nuclear sites should not be attacked. So Iran is trying to find strength in going back to United Nations laws and resolutions and the laws of war. But it's not working against Israel, who basically says you're an existential threat to us. And you've heard from many of Western foreign ministers, most of all Germany, saying Israel has a right to defend itself. His line, too, is that there's been a betrayal of diplomacy. They want the doors open for diplomacy, but not when this is happening.
And very clear as well, using language about American collusion with Israel, that they now see this as essentially a joint mission, it would appear, US and Israel united in the attacks.
No, I interviewed the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister last week, Saeed Khatibzadeh, and he said that they heard, in private, they received messages indirectly, as we just heard, from the Americans saying we were not involved, this was an Israeli strike. Marco Rubio said that also in public. But then you got President Trump coming out and saying we have superiority over the skies of Tehran. And President Trump almost seeming to take credit for what he described as the excellent Israeli strikes. So both in diplomacy as well in war, the Iranians keep saying they don't understand what the message is from the United States. And as you know, Katrina, there are different messages coming out. Most of them from President Trump, who a little more than 10 days ago was telling Israel, stop threatening Iran militarily. You're getting in the way of my diplomacy. Now he seems to have really put on his commander-in-chief hat and really wants to be seen as the one who is now, and he is, directing the course of this war.
For those who have grave concerns about regional escalation here, what will they have taken from what the foreign minister said there?
He was asked specifically whether Iran would block the Strait of Hormuz. That's a very critical waterway where a lot of the oil freighters pass through. That would have, if that is closed, it would have a huge impact on oil prices worldwide. It would have an impact on economic activity worldwide. He refused to be drawn on whether he would do that because Iran has to balance carefully. It doesn't want to infuriate Iran's Arab allies in this fight. They also do not want a wider escalation of this war. There aren't any good options for Iran. If it attacks U.S. military bases in the region, there's at least 8 bases, plus many other U.S. military targets that they could possibly look at. They will draw the United States in more directly. If they take economic action, that will backfire on Iran. So again, he was adamant there will be a response, but they have to calculate carefully. But as always, Katrina, in this kind of an escalating tension, it's not just what you do, but how the other side perceives what you do. And therefore, whatever Iran does will be regarded as being threatening from the United States and Israel, who are likely to retaliate. I'm sure we saw last year where there were these direct strikes between Iran and Israel, that behind the scenes there were people saying, okay, right, you've You've responded. Let's leave it there. Restraint. But we are in a totally new game now.
And it appeared from what we heard from President Trump last night that he was kind of saying, oh, this is the only thing we're doing. But of course, can't say that for sure until we see the Iranian response.
Yes, he said you have to come to peace. And as always with President Trump, you don't know what come to peace means. He wanted Iran to effectively negotiate a new nuclear deal in 60 days. And when that didn't work, Israel attacked on the 61st day. It took 2 years to negotiate the last Iran nuclear deal. A new one shouldn't take that long. They can build on the old one, but they were, even though both sides said they were close, it could not have been done in 60 days. And President Trump, as you know, Katrina, likes to do things quickly. A deal in a day. It won't take a day to do a deal. The message from the Europeans in Geneva was only diplomacy can find a way forward. We've seen time and again in the Middle East that military action does not provide a long-term solution.
Okay, Lise Doucette, thanks for that. We're just going to go live now to the statement being made by the IDF. So let's listen in to what they're saying.
Massacre. Staff Sergeant Chai Levinson was 19 years old. He was a tank commander who bravely fought against terrorists on the morning of October 7th. He fell in battle, defending Israeli communities until his last moments. His body was then taken to Gaza. 50 hostages still remain in brutal captivity. We will not rest until every hostage is home. We will continue to act with resolve and determination to protect the citizens of Israel. Thank you very much.
Hang on.
So we've just been watching there a statement from IDF Brigadier General Effie Defrin talking about a story separate to the strikes on Iran, but linked all the same, that the IDF has recovered the bodies of 3 hostages from Gaza. We'll have more for that from that for you in a little moment. But of course, we're in our rolling coverage here of the latest development in Iran. The US striking 3 nuclear sites in Iran overnight. Let's hear from President Donald Trump as he announced those strikes had taken place. In an address at the White House, he said future attacks would be far greater and a lot easier if Iran didn't make peace.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue.
President Trump there speaking from the White House, flanked by the Vice President, by the Secretary of State and Acting National Security Advisor, and by the Defense Secretary. Now, during those remarks, President Trump said that 3 key sites had been hit in Iran. So let's have a look at just what those sites are and where they are. So they're located at Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. President Trump said these sites had been obliterated. That's the word that he used. Esfahan is a uranium conversion plant, whilst Natanz is an enrichment plant. But even before the US strikes, the International Atomic Energy Agency said that Natanz had sustained severe damage. But the main site hit was Fordo. The uranium enrichment site is situated about 60 miles, 100 kilometres or so south of the capital, Tehran, in a mountainous region. It's thought to consist of 2 main tunnels. Now, they house centrifuges used to enrich uranium. There's also a network of smaller tunnels in there. Reaching this underground installation, which is located about 60 metres below ground, required more powerful weapons, so-called